Hey all, so we're back. I feel like it's been a long time. Um, I just finished going through. Well, first of all, I hope you're all well and you're all taking care of each other, take care of yourself, eating well, sleeping well. Don't go out too much. Wash those hands. You know the drill. Um, I also hope that you're all keeping yourself busy in constructive ways. Um, So, once what is it, been over a month now, and, once you get over the gleeful gaga of, oh my God, no work, no school, so to speak, and being home, you realize you've got time. We're busy with schoolwork and other work and all that, but you've suddenly got time, more time than you had before in certain ways. And, again, I think there's certainly a portion of it goes to just vegging. I saw Tiger King. Yes, I did. Oh my God. Anyway, but I'm one of those people that needs to always be doing something, not in a frenetic, compulsive way. Just I like to always be doing something I believe is worthwhile doing. So I tend to do lots of things. Like I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of writing. I work out best I can. I play my guitars. You can't see my guitars here. I play my guitars, try to make music of some kind. And I'm always trying to do something that I think is in some ways in my own brain meaningful. And I think that if maybe, if there's a lesson in all of this, I'm sure there are a number of lessons, appreciating mindfulness and centering yourself and all that. But if maybe we can accumulate stuff in our brains and our hearts that are we can offer when we get out of here. I feel like I'm in solitary, and but when all this is over, whatever that is and whatever that means, and we go back out there again and we mingle with each other, it would be nice to have something, a book that you've read, special or one or two great movies that you got to see that you could talk about. Maybe a poem that you've read, maybe something, maybe even a song from the list on the discussion board that you didn't hear before, or that I talked about, or something that you discovered that helps you be a better person, even if it's just collecting information that you can go back and use later on. I think hopefully we'll come out of this with more of us to offer each other. So that's my message there, as best I can. But if I want to come back to the course for a second, I read as many as there are now of your song suggestions. A lot of people did not respond. I wish you would get on there. I think people are actually responding to each other's. I think it's fun. And some of you guys did a wonderful job of writing a little, encapsulation, articulating what you think the song is trying to do. And I'm looking out the window and it's really dark over there. So if suddenly this all goes blank, it's because everything exploded in my neighborhood. So it's good to hear this thing because you guys are actually making really a lot of sense. And sometimes I read ahead and I haven't heard the song yet, so I'm writing down a list on my desk and I'll get into the song as soon as I can. And sometimes I read your blurb, and it makes me want to hear the song even more because of what you say about it. So this is good. I'm proud of the writing that you guys are doing for this class, even if it's only a paragraph here and there. One thing about the essays, I just wanted to remind everybody, one of the more common, if I can go off topic for a second, one of the more common complaints I have about a number of the essays, as well as they were written, some of them forget to go and focus on the course, that is anything that we're looking at that reflects the popular culture such as it is, which is what we did every class we were in until we had to stay home. So a lot of times people would write, for instance, if it's about drugs or about fashion or about whatever it is, And they would write about them as general topics that would be perfectly good for a WSC1 class, but not for a WSC2 class, which asks for a different perspective depending upon the theme. And this theme is pop culture. So for instance, let's just assume for the sake of discussion right now that you're going to be writing about music in some capacity. Now, I already talked about music in the first video, the last one. I included, how do we listen? What do we listen to? How has it changed? Does it mean anything that we listen with earbuds as opposed to a transistor radio or an 8-track? We watch television and we see movies in a different way than we did then, not that long ago. And what does all that mean? I mean, that's that kind of thing, because what we do now reflects on the culture now. So that's why we're doing this, trying to help understand ourselves better. So try to keep it from becoming a broad expository essay about pop music or about whatever the topic is. You are zeroing in on something that you think says something about, represents or reflects the culture. So anyway, I listened to the music, and I picked a few songs you heard from last time. So I have a couple of observations. And again, as I'm writing this all down in my notes, I realized that a couple of general things, some of which I may have mentioned in class. One is that there are people who believe that every generation needs to rebel, or complain, make itself unique on some level. And of course, this is a debatable topic. I tend to think it's true, or it should be true. But then again, I come from a generation that just blasted the 50s. I came right at it, came into the 60s, and everything was new. We just said no to the 50s and 40s and said, okay, this is going to be new. And for better or for worse, And we talked about some of that: drugs, fashion, music, cinema, whatever. And so this is the way you want to look at things. Now, there are some of you who may say, no, we think this generation is pretty much just like so many other ones. No big deal. You don't always have to rebel. Why rebel if there's nothing to rebel against, or whatever your argument is? So I'm allowing for that. I mean, that certainly makes logical sense. But one of the things that I do have, that a lot of us have, is age. And there's nothing I can do about it. I'm older than you. And, if you stick around long enough, you realize that just things, they come around again. They repeat. They persist. Or just they don't go away. And so once in a while, you can see, this is why I finally figured out why old people, I'm not calling myself old, by the way, why old people get bored easily. Because a lot of them, if we pay attention, I think, have seen it before, or seen some semblance of it, some form of it. And this is not a new idea or a new thing. There are things that are, absolutely, and I'll get to some of those, but we'll talk a little bit about them. So anyway, some of what you guys, and I'm only talking about the songs now that you sent, and I went through them, and these are general comments, okay? And I will not be judgmental. It's hard not to be judgmental because everyone has an opinion, but I'm not judging here. I'm simply observing, okay? And this is an important distinction also. If I was about to write a paper about this, I'd have to say something about what I'm observing, not just giving you the observation. So for one thing, it seems that everybody seems to feel that expression and rebellion seems to be the name of the game. There's a lot of that, a lot of ranting and raving out there about things that are wrong with the world. This again, and I'll say this a couple of times in this little video, that's not a new idea. The idea of complaining, when in the 60s and 70s they had protest songs about various things. And now we have ranting rap songs, hip hop songs that just sort of list things that are wrong with society and the world. And of course, that's another way in. The question is, if we don't call them protest songs, which I don't think we would call them, what would we call them? How would, the anti-Vietnam songs or songs against shootings in colleges in Kent State way back in the 60s and 70s, these were directed, protested at particular things. A collection of rants against so many things is not exactly the same thing, and this is what maybe can be explored. I'm looking at my notes here, sorry. I didn't fall asleep, I swear. You think that things would have changed more. As I was listening to what your comments were and the songs you chose, I kept asking myself, I really thought that things were going to be different. I thought that the kinds of things that you would have been complaining about or be concerned with would have been markedly different, but they really weren't. And again, that's not a criticism. You just wonder, maybe things don't change all that much at all, and which is also something to be said about human nature. Maybe we just don't learn our lessons. So here's a couple of quick things that seem to be a recurrent themes throughout the music. One was stress, although nobody really commented on stress from what exactly. And it's hard to say everything, but stress. Again, I mentioned ranting. There was some mention of drinking. Somebody wrote a song, I forget the name of the song, about drinking and there's drugs. Drinking and drugs are still there, but it never sounded like much of a problem. It just seems like something we do. Loneliness. The ephemeral quality of life. What are you going to do? It's all over anyway. It's going to end. That sort of fatalism that comes up. One thing that came up was interesting was one or two songs referring to we're not going to make the same mistakes the older generation made. And my God, if I may quote my grandmother, she would say things like, well, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, it's always them, right? It's always the older generation. It's always your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. It's always the other generation. Which doesn't mean that that you're guiltless or guilty. I just mean we always want to repair or make it better. And some song, I forget the name of the song now, one of the refrains was, "You can't take away my youth." I forget who the hell wrote that. Someone's going to remind me. But, which I thought was interesting because, no kidding. Who can take away your youth? I suppose you can in terms of, what can happen in one's life. But, it's not something we can grab, like innocence, The other thing is we don't, nobody takes away your youth. You lose it, like you lose innocence. And we use the word lose, which is a shame because when we use the word lose, it's like it's not intentional and you want it back. I lost my keys. Where the hell are my keys? It's not that, and yet we lose it. So you won't take away my youth seems to be a truism, but it also means that I'm not going to let you put me in a position that will alter this in some way. There are some things that were more specific, and this can be dangerous, but can be interesting too. For instance, my generation did not grow up with terrorism. You did. And probably your older brothers and sisters did too, but not too far back. Terrorism has been something of your life, all of your life, which makes you distinctively different from generations. I don't know when. I'm not good with dates. From the 90s and beyond, or maybe even before that. Yeah, whatever. We didn't have it. It wasn't an issue. So what does that mean? What is that? What kind of a toll has that taken on this generation? And is it irreparable? What does it mean to grow up in a world where terrorism is just an everyday existence? And the same thing with other things. Some of the songs mentioned racism and gun control and shootings. Don't forget, a lot of generations have had, varying levels of violence and racism, which we still do. And it's not so much. I think we need to reformulate the question. It's not so much why won't it go away. This is going to sound like I'm saying the same thing twice. It's not like, oh my God, are we still racist? Are we still carrying guns? Why don't we? It's why is it still with us? Because most people agree that racism is wrong, and a lot of people agree about guns, but we still somehow believe that we're all a well-organized militia. In any event, these are not new things, but the fact that they still exist in 2020 with your generation, what does this mean? Does it mean anything different than it meant when somebody was younger in the 60s or the 50s or the 40s or other generations? Or is it just something that we suddenly realized, like, this is just what humans do? The other thing that people brought up was the pandemic. And I hesitate to include this in our discussion because right now it's an anomaly. And first of all, it's affecting everyone, not just Generation Z or whatever this generation is. It's affecting the whole world. But that notwithstanding, it's going to be over, hopefully. Let's just say it's going to be over the next couple of years, and it's done. Does the pandemic define a generation? Now, if it lasts long enough, I suppose it can, obviously. The other thing to consider, and it's too soon to tell, is what kind of world are we going to be in, either globally or even just here in New York, after this is over and we can go out and mingle with each other again. What kind of a world are we going to have? Will we shake hands? Will we ever get closer than 6 feet? Dining out, going to the movies, taking planes, taking boats, and how will the world be different? That's the part that's interesting to know. We can't know that yet. And it may be, I think it's too early to think about writing about it unless you're going to write something that predicts what will happen. Like, here's the way you see life after the pandemic. And then you can talk about a generation being affected by it or defined by it. I lived in a world, and so did you prior to this, in a world without a pandemic, so we can compare. Here's the other thing. All of this that we've talked about, I've just mentioned, can be debated and discussed. That's fine. But here's what I found most interesting about all of the things you guys said on the discussion board. I found what was conspicuously absent is, now I'm going to sound like a hippie, right? Love, romance, relationships, lust, passion. Nothing about that. And I have to wonder why. And again, I don't mean to keep comparing, but pick almost any other generation, whether they were like silly pop songs in 1951, but there were always songs about love and peace and happiness and relationships and oh, what a wonderful world, and somewhere over the rainbow. And my goodness, there was for all the songs that might have been more specific about issues, there were a billion songs that were positive and uplifting and happy songs. What does it say about this generation? And I mentioned it to a few of you. I keep pointing to my computer. A few of you online on the discussion board about. Are you saying that this generation is this dark? Especially some of you chose, there was a discussion about an old Elton John song, I Think I'm Gonna Kill Myself, from 1972. Where did that come from? My goodness. and isn't really a reflection of the time. I mean, I know suicide is an issue, you know, always an issue for some groups of people, but is that song, and as I suggested on the discussion board, can you find a song that's a modern version of that sentiment, not an updated version of that song, but a song that takes on this topic in a new way. I really didn't expect an old Elton John song to show up at all, but there you go. In any event, so those are some observations. I can't wait to read more. We're winding down in the semester, and I'm gonna stop by suggesting that you start assessing the pop culture such as it is. We looked at a whole number of topics throughout the semester. So, when all is said and done, what can we say about you guys as a group? And so start thinking of that bigger topic. I think that's where we're headed in terms of a final essay. Try to get you to offer your own perspective, your own philosophy about it. And there's no absolutes, rights and wrongs, but there are, better perspectives than others. So start thinking about that, because that's where we're going. Okay. Anyway, that's it. I think the storm is passing right now. It's still raining, but it's not as dark as it was. Everybody be well, stay well, take care of each other, and think about what I said about using the time free productively, making you a better person so that when you go out, you have something to give. Peace, everybody.